Oh, here we are. Hey, welcome online. Nice to see you, Philippe, for this conversation. I would like to start by thanking Nara Roesler for hosting this live conversation. We actually will go through your work and a few comparative images for 45 minutes. And the idea is basically to get, put things in perspective, in a historical perspective, just to understand your work better. Going through your career through some the early 2000s until today. I have to mention that I was very lucky to curate your show last year at Nara Roesler in both locations, in Sao Paulo and in Rio, for a double retrospective show, we can say. And I'm very happy to be here. And yes, we can maybe go straight into the images that we gathered to illustrate this discussion. So maybe we can launch the first image, which is very important to me. But before that, on the PDF, but before that, I'd like to remind that we met in 2003 when, Philippe, you had your first exhibition in Paris at a very nice place. And the interesting thing is that I started to work in 2000 on optical and kinetic art as an historical trend. And we met at this moment, actually. I was very surprised that some artists, some young artists, I mean, my generation, were interested into this history that was at the time really forgotten, and nobody took care about this except a few artists, like to mention, like Karsten Oehler, Olafur Eliasson. Not so many people were paying attention to this part of history, and we met at this very moment. The work we have, the black and white one, I saw it a little bit after that, probably 2 years, but maybe Philippe can correct me on that, at the Centre Culturel Suisse in Paris. So, and it was something really strong that I really actually made me enter the work even more. Maybe, Philippe, could you say a few words about this very initial work?
Yeah, I start that series of paintings. It's called the Black Paintings. And of course, it's related to the Frank Stella paintings. But I was really interested in bringing into that history, into the modern history, a shape that has some distortion into, I mean, the content and the shape. So I did use like a vanishing point, like a perspective effect, to bring into the painting a quality of an image, a quality of a kind of representation. And all the series of the black paintings are taking those concentric white lines on the black shapes. Shape canvas, and with always a kind of distortion.
I was very surprised, actually, when I entered the room. This was the only painting in a quite small room, and the effect was really striking. The simplicity of the composition and the was basically fighting the complexity of the effect. For a moment, something wasn't right. Was I seeing this painting with an angle, or was I seeing it, directly facing it? There was this very strong tension, revealing actually the some problematics of perception in your work that are very strong. I remember at the time, Bridget Riley in 1965 and James Turrell 10 years after, both said perception is the medium. So if your work is really made of canvases, stretched, fabricked on a shaped canvas, on a shaped stretchers, it's very important to see that what you're dealing with a part of the time is really the way we handle these objects. So I wanted to put in comparison with this object 2 photographs after that of works by Frank Stella. One of them is taken frontally, is frontal, and the second one that we will see now is taken with an angle. There are 2 different pictures of the same work. If you can have a look at the next one. Here it is. So basically, it's very interesting how you succeeded in getting 2 different points of view, the real one and the perspective point of view, together in the previous work. So this is a nice way to enter your work. If we can see now the next images that maybe Philippe will comment.
Well, I think we can stay on that. I think
Sure.
the idea of the perspective image is also, it gives to the observer also the idea that is looking to a perspective effect. So maybe you can go on with the concentric colors.
So it was quite interesting to make a link to Julio Leparc, because the work by Frank Stella are very. It's a different trend. It's really minimal art, while Julio Leparc makes kinetic art, of course. But there are very similar ways to handle paintings, because both are painting. For Stella, it's really made with what we call, it's a deductive structure. It's basically one broken line that, once repeated, would basically get you the shape, the whole shape of the canvas. We can say exactly the same thing with Julio Leparc, with this series of 4 works that I suppose Nara Roesler's friends are familiar with, because it's a very similar story of concentrating the gaze and dispersing it at the same time, or in 2 consecutive movements. The question of pulsating a work that is go to you and go away at the same time, or pulsating like a flicker, is very important for you, Philippe. And those are references that we could kind of put together to understand your own, not only reference, because you went far beyond, but still, historically, those are these things we can put your work in perspective with. So maybe we can now look at the next one, and noticing that the color is very important for Leparc, but at the same time, you try to keep one color at a time. There are not so many works with 2 or maybe 3 colors in your career, Philippe. What would you say about this concentration of the colors?
I mean, in fact, I'm not agree. I think there is a lot of colors in the body of work and in the painting itself.
Not all together. That's the thing.
All together, if we can have a look at the following yellow cross shaped canvas. It's that shaped canvas is conceived with, that we will see shortly, is conceived with 11 gradient shades of colors from yellow to black. That means you can perceive that the color is going from black to yellow in a kind of rational way. But in fact, you have 11 steps and 11 different colors. You have green, you have dark green, you have light yellow. I mean, so it's just because you have in a kind of really specific order that you can imagine, you will produce a kind of projection that for you it's just a black going to yellow. And in fact, it's not a color painting. It's or a yellow or a black painting.
I mean, the gradient is important, yeah.
So it's give you the position to choose. So you have to choose, because you will not say it's a 11 colors painting. So you have to choose, and you will choose the yellow, because we have that kind of concentric conditions. We like center, we like to see periphery as something being outside. So we like to organize things. So it's always about that kind of organization and playing with that. And that one, for me, it's a mark. It's really giving a mark onto the wall, up the wall. But the mark, the center of the mark, the center of the cross is a void. It's a black.
So it's like if the center is freed from forms, from shapes. It's interesting because these very works we've seen, and many of them are reminding us that vision is not only centered, it can be peripheral as well. Usually, when you look at something, it's one of the laws of vision. We focus on a centered object in the middle of a bigger composition. That's how we function. There is nothing in the center. And the black you use, if I must mention it, is very matte, so it doesn't reflect light as well. This is clearly not the soulage black. This is something that is absorbing the light. So is it very interesting to see that the peripheral vision is woken up, if we can say. Maybe we can have a look at the next image now.
Yeah, I like to play with those idea of center, giving an attention. Like the observer is in a position when you do a painting or you show a painting, you give to the observer the attention. You say, okay, look in that direction. If with Frank Stella is giving you all the device through paintings to give you the description of the painting, but you also give you your position. So in the next, like the 3-star paintings that that we can see now on picture number 6. In fact, it's the same than the yellow one before, but it's in a different position. So the cross is shifting in angle, and you have 3 different, 3 times the same shapes, but in a different scale. So it's giving you like three positions in the same time. So it's giving you 3 centers. And I like to think of that group of paintings, which it's a triptych that can be displayed in different places for, a room or for an exhibition. So it's never the same. It's really playing with the space and playing with the wall. For me, it's that kind of position marks that you can have in printing. So that means all the information you have outside the page, all the information you need to produce the work, but that are outside the page. So for me, it's like bringing the printing mark or the mark in the center of the wall and playing to say, okay, look to this, it's far, it's small. Look to that, it's front, it's big, and in a really simple way.
We can also something really important when we are in the space. That's something obviously that we can't feel looking at our computer screens or phone screens right now. But the question of the live experiment is fundamental, because all these 3 paintings, when you are in a 3 space, this triptych basically is very, you feel that the smaller paintings are further than the bigger ones. So there is also a very strong physical play with the viewer that you brought back into the real space, the real time and space, the one of the gallery. So it's basically experienced based art, actually, and that's very, very important. And we can also mention in the next image that we have...
Maybe we can give the number of the image to be clearer and to stay then on the image before to move, if it's possible. So maybe we go on image number 7. So 7, so the one before, please.
No, maybe we can focus. Yeah.
So there is one missing. Okay.
It was anyway. There was the sculpture in the front is made of 3 elements. Unfortunately, we only see 2 of them. It was a picture made during a different installation, but this triptych goes with 3 sculptural elements that are materializing the gaze of some observers in a print that maybe, Philippe, you can say a few words about it.
It's three elements. It's coming from, I mean, the work, it's a sculptural work, but it's referred to an engraving of Abraham Boss called Libra Specter.
What year again?
It's 17th century, middle of the 17th century, and it's about the theory of perspective, of vanishing point. But at that time, it's not anymore only about the idea of representation or the representation of perspective. It's about how also the waves from the eye to the object, or from the object and the space to the eye, are behaving. So it's really trying to understand how a shape is producing an effect or an image on the eye. And it's not really clear at that time if it's going from one way or the other way. So the question of the sense is quite important, the direction. What is the direction of, I would say, the circulation of the wave? But it's giving, so from one eye to a shape on the floor, and it's always drawing that shape in the space from one eye to the floor, to a square on the floor. And
so you put those drawings, forgotten drawings, like nobody knows Abraham Boss, but you found them in your readings, and you decided that they would be very interesting sculptures in itself, made as proper sculptures. And the peak of every sculpture corresponds to the position in space of one observer. One is seated,
exactly.
One is standing, and the other is positioned on the second floor of a building. So it's a very long sculpture. So it says something about this question of materializing vision somehow. So maybe in the next image we could have another idea about this logic.
Oh, yes,
it was a work shown in Rio during your exhibition. A few of them, similar shapes, but with amazing differences between them, including in terms of color, actually. And the next image gives you an illustrating idea about how those shapes, we basically cut the white wall, the white cube of the gallery. How the fact that the white, the neutrality of the white is very important, especially for these shaped canvas. They are kind of sculpture in 2.5 dimensions somehow, if I could say, because they have a materiality. So in the space, they will basically cut a hole through the wall. And we can see here what you were speaking about, the different colors. I mean, I said there is only 1 or 2 colors at the time, but of course I was wrong. It's a gradient from one value to another value, and it goes through a large range. But of course, I remember, like Julio Leparc, when he said he said, either I don't use any color, I use only black, gray, and white. The non-colors was mentioned by Mondrian. And if I don't do that, I use every color. So the whole spectrum will be in the painting. So I don't make any choice. Here, you focus on two values with all the gradients in between. So that's very important in terms of the history of painting. There's a very different position, actually, different attitudes toward basically the amazing liberty you can have with the colors. You can put like tens of colors into them, but your painting is very process-based. It must be very clear. You never take complexity too high. It must still be something you understand clearly, but that you will perceive a very complex way. So maybe the next image says something about it as well. It was in Sao Paulo for your show. You have two works. The one on the left corresponds to what we've seen before with the idea of the, let's say again, deductive structure. I mean, you have one line that will be multiplied and aligned with the others, and then it will give the shape of the painting. But the one I wanted to show is a specific installation, first time made for this exhibition. In the previous image, please. On the right is basically a hole cut through the wall. I was saying that some paintings were, literally digging holes into the walls. Here, you did it as an installation. It means that both rooms that were close from another, there was an opening through them, but not just a regular hole with a specific shape. This in-between space was filled with different glasses together. And those glasses, they seem transparent, but they are not really. So basically, the light was fading. It was clear at the front, and then darker at the end. And you could see every room from the other room. So, and it was a perfect transition, actually, because it says something about how architectonic, architectural your art is. It has a strong link with the space. It's not a world in itself, like the window open on the world, like they used to think during the Renaissance. It's something really based in the concrete, in the concrete world. So maybe we can see the next image to see the next room and appreciate the transition of it. So maybe
what we can say is like the previous installation is coming from the center of one of those paintings. I mean, the one we can see in front. So it's like to giving a materialistic reality to that center that I try to avoid or to make empty in most of my paintings. So in that installation before, it was like giving the shape and not playing on the wall or with the wall, but to play inside the wall with the 5 layers of glasses. And then, of course, it was related with that installation of paintings, playing always with the same shape in different position, and with always a different gradient, going from black to white in the center, from white in the center to black outside, or center middle with both white inside outside. So really playing with all the possible variation of those paintings. It's called Delay. So the title is quite important for that series of painting. It's and now we have a moiré delay, but as a delay, it's always composed of gradient colors. For that series, it's a 30 different shade of gray, from white to black. And I like to make some links with the moving image, with the idea of we the division of time, the division of image. So I've been doing a lot of painting delays with 24 lines related to the 24 image per second, but also related to 24 hours. An idea of, it's not like to play with really evident idea of time, but it's more about the idea of division. Like it's a division of space into lines that are giving an information. So
it's very rational. The process is always very rational, deductive again. You don't want, you want basically every decision you took conceptually clear. It's very important. And that's one of your very strong links with what we called concrete art, concrete Kunst. The fact that you don't want to mystify the viewer is very important. But it's funny because you're always standing away from the strong effects, because you could do, of course, very much stronger effects with you could go for Baroque thing, and you always keep it incredibly simple. That's one of the qualities of your work. The effects are powerful, but the facts are conceptually always very rational, simple, and that's very crucial. And that's funny because we have, I guess, on many phones, many screens, we have an effect that is well known in the optical logics, is that there is a moire superimposed effect due to the fight between the grid of your work and the grid, the invisible grid of the screens, which basically is vertical and horizontal lines. And this will create a moire effect that doesn't exist when you see the real work. But I guess the other images will help us to see that.
So we can go on the next image,
which basically it's a wonderful installation that is a Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris. On the left, of course, you have Philippe Decrauzat's work, and on the right, very easy to recognize, is one of the versions of La Danse by Matisse. This duo actually is very, very expressive for me, as it would remind the echo between the two logics, the dance, the link with architecture for Matisse, and of course the torsion, the twist, that is basically one twisted line repeating a certain number of times. I don't know how many lines exactly, it's pretty hard to count, even if you see the lines on the real paintings. But those lines repeated and with a change of direction will basically remind a very interesting moment of art history, is that the columns, the torsaded columns of Saint Peter in Rome. I always think about that when I see this motif. It's funny because how your minimal logic will sometimes put a step into Baroque. That's what is interesting, into the expressivity, like something really mannered, actually, in the world of sculpture. When a body is like that, when the shoulders make a horizontal this kind of line, and when the hips do the other line, we call that a contrapposto, and it's a very mannerist way to represent the dynamic of the body. But that's what, for this series, is one of the most embodied. I mean, with all the curves, reminding the curves of the body, of course, and the curves here of Matisse. That's a beautiful example.
I think it's really, if you think of the Matisse work, it's showing a body in different positions. So it's also that idea of film. So bringing the figure into a structure that will give you the perception of different position of the body. And for those paintings, I was talking about the 24 lines that could be related to 24 images. But for those paintings, it was a series of 4 paintings. It's like the vertical wave suite. and not a suite, but a suite. And it's a double installation with 2 diptychs, or it could be the 4 paintings together. Here we can see only 2, but the idea was the position. We can see the position of the same shapes, but in 4 different positions, like with a vertical flip and an upside down also play. So, and the film and what we with analogical imagery, imagical photography and film, it was possible to play and to, in a material way, to play and to reverse in all those directions the medium. So in that situation, the paintings are really related to that. And to have the idea of the dance with that, I think it's completely making sense.
We can make a nice transition to the next image. Following the logic, one of your strong logic is the series, the variation on the same shape, on the same principle of repetition. Repetition is very important, actually, and you find this repetition in some series of work, and that work absolutely together. This is another view of the exhibition in the Sao Paulo part at Nara Roesler Gallery. And you could see this beautiful series actually based on the gradient of one color, not to another color, not from yellow to green, for example, but this going from red to white, and this very slow gradient, absolutely well executed. Actually, that require. I saw you working. It looks so simple. It looks like it's been burnt by the sky, by the sun, or that there is some, I don't know, like a mist going through the exhibition space. But it's absolutely painted, layers by layers. It's a very painstakingly process. So in the end, you have something that is absolutely worth mentioning, is that none of these 4 paintings are identical. You changed the width of every line on every painting. So basically, in the first painting, you should have, I don't remember exactly, sorry, Philippe, but it's like 19, then 20, then 21, then 22. Hence, and the size of the canvas doesn't change. So basically, those lines are getting narrower every time. But these are things you can't see at first time, but it gives to the observer a very strange feeling of you can't handle the thing, you can't process. And it's very important, this kind of tipsy feeling that you achieve to create in the observer's eye.
Yeah, also series of the slow motion are variation. We can see the next one, the blue to white one. And so it's not to produce an image of a striped painting, it's to play with the numbers, the division of the shape. So it has really nothing to do with the idea of doing an image. It's like just the division of the support, of the size, of the scale. But also it's that transition from one color to another with no step. We had step before. In the triangle, you have step. It's like, and what is a step? It's a stop. Is where you ask to the, and you give the information. It's a stop. That part is homogeneous. I would say it's one color, one object. In that part, you have not one color. It's just going from the materiality of painting from one color to another. So you can stop, but you will never be able to say really the color you have in front. And it's done with painting, so it's not. I would say it's not. I mean, it's just done with pigment and acrylic painting. So you will see some default of the brush. It's part of the painting, but it's where you stop and where you start from. It's a signal for me. It's more like a signal than.
So maybe we can go to the next images. because we have plenty. We put, of course, too much, but it's nice to see this one that is based with on another color, but it's basically the same principle. Maybe the next image. So this is another series that is, again, playing with real space. Can I say that you did all the columns that we see here were built by you according to the size of some paintings, and all the paintings, the real, paintings, canvas that you have around here are parts of a wider pattern that you divided into space, into a little excerpts, so to say. So you never see one of your paintings as a world, again, a word in itself, an autonomous logic. It's always corresponding to wider thing. Every work is part of a continuum. A precise.
It's always it's even an exercise to try to describe, because it was a gallery in New York, and I took the glass door, the glass window of the entrance, and I reproduce all the elements, all the 7 elements of the windows, like the windows, the doors, the part of the wall that are composing that window in the space. So I project the window into the space, and then it's giving me the size to divide a painting.
And so,
all the paintings were coming from that famous article on Moiré effect in '63 in Scientific American.
And it's interesting to see, if I may, is that some patterns are pre-existing patterns, and you kind of explored all the possibility of one pattern. It's really the idea.
Come back.
The idea of the found image. So basically, this cover was just illustrating the Moiré effect, and you used it as a motive, but you're not hiding it like something. You appropriated. You made this pattern yours, and you developed in many directions. And so there are a few paintings actually made after this logic. So maybe we can go to the next one, because we only have like 30 minutes left and plenty of images to see. So this is a mural. I just wanted people to remind me, if you can stay on this image, the example of Carlos Cruz Diez, who basically did those Mural projection in the early 70s, but they were projected images onto walls, actually, and visitors were able to evolve into it. The participative aspect, the common bath of color was very important for him. But of course, that's an artist that we can put, of course, in the logic. Maybe the next one now. We have, of course, when speaking about environment, ambient, we have to mention Continuum by Bridget Riley. It's really interesting work. It's basically a spiral. As we took it on the floor, it's a spiral, but you can get into the spiral. She painted the inside of a spiral, and visitors could get into it. And it's very important because in Bridget Riley, it was a one moment. She only did one very environment. She did some wall paintings, as you did. She did some proper paintings, but she didn't want to go too far into the installation and environment thing. I think, like you are still considering yourself as a painter, as she did. And it's funny because at the time, in the 60s, she was a bit in opposition with people like, Heinz Mack, Le Parc, even Morellet, because she wanted to stick to the tradition of painting. And I think you still define yourself as a painter, even if your practice basically goes far beyond the world of painting, even abstract painting, even concrete art, even concrete kunst. Of course, it goes beyond. You handle architecture, you handle the observer very different ways. That's a painting by by Bridget Riley. It was, I have to mention that this work is very important to understand your own work, specifically because of the way it's done. Bridget Riley didn't want to have accidents on the paintings. She didn't want to have stains. She didn't want to have, mistakes that will basically stop the gaze onto the surface. It means that if you see a little stain here or a line that is not perfectly well defined, you will focus on it. It's not a problem in general, but for her, it will break the logic of the perception as a phenomenon, as a time-based experience. She doesn't want people to look at the paintings as they would look at any image. And so that's a very important way to understand your work as well. And we said, oh yeah, Bridget Riley, she did only black and white work. Not at all. She did some during 61 and 65. That's a very specific moment in her life, but it's worth mentioning. Maybe we can check the next image now. So maybe you can say, Philippe, where it is.
It was for an exhibition in Paris at Le Plateau, and it's the first room of the exhibition, with taking back the moiré from the scientific review, Scientific American. But in that version, it's in black and white. But you could find some drawing also in black and white. In fact, on cover is because it's inside the magazine, it was in black and white. But it's really taking that picture and trying to expand the picture, to enter the logic. So it's not about appropriation. I think there is even nothing to appropriate about a moiré. The moiré, it's a kind of phenomenon that you can observe. So people are playing with that. Even the scientific who used to produce the article in Scientific American became a painter, was then producing some paintings. But it was because he was talking of the capacity of the moiré to give us some information on perception, but in a really large scale, in a really like using it as a matrix. And we can come back to the black and white wall painting. It's
it was also frontal view. Very interesting.
Like a cinematic way to play a wall painting into a room that is really dealing with the angle of the room, with the walls in a different way at each point.
Philippe, since we have 2 minutes left, why should we? Maybe we should browse through the last images. Spend a few seconds on each. If someone at the gallery can just play them, like, okay, this is the Palais de Tokyo with a very music-based logic. And all the evolutions correspond to another image by Oscar Fischinger, who collaborated with Disney for Fantasia. That's a panopticon. We will basically replicate the logics of another view, actually, with a viewer placed in the center. That's a work actually that's been presented at the Plateau and in a different way in Brazil, in Sao Paulo for exhibitions, and that's of course a blink to Robert Smithson with the idea of the panopticon view, making a sculpture out of it. So one of the important reference. This is maybe can you describe things as fast as badly as I do, Philippe?
No, it's no.
No.
Sorry.
I think it's right for the audience to see all these references. Unfortunately, we will lack time. But this is a very old reference. I insisted to put this image on it. It's one of your first wall paintings, and you basically took the motif out of a pretty famous movie, The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, and that's basically the floor that the little kid was riding on in his little scooter. And you made a wall painting out of it, but distorted it and brought it back to the the world of painting and wall painting. So it's funny because we discovered that Sheila Hicks, another artist of the 60s, was the one who picked this very motif to place it into Kubrick's movie. But we discovered it recently, thanks to Michel Gauthier, curator at the Pompidou, that we say hi to. And maybe we can say the next image. So another movie reference, because your work, we didn't speak too much about it, is basically infused with many cinematic and film references. The movie Tron, it's an old work, actually. I don't remember the year. I think it's 2005 installation.
2001.
2001, sorry. And the discs that you have in the movie, you could play those frisbees. You made paintings out of them on real plastic frisbees, and they were basically evoluting in a space dedicated to this limitless white cube.
Yeah, but you were not supposed to play with it.
No, of course, it's not participative. It's not, Le Parc House of Games, of course, but it was placed as an installation, not participative. I mean, the most important participation is the spectator being evolved into the real time and space experience. It's not, pushing a button and getting a response. You know what I mean? Maybe the next image. Maybe Philippe?
No, maybe we can go the next two more, and the one from Secession, which installation with paintings, wall paintings covering the entire walls of the gallery, and it was in the Secession in 2008, and a sculpture in the middle. And that is, we have been showing that piece in the exhibition you have been creating at Le Grand Palais Dynamo. And so the structure is related to Gustav
Klutzis, yeah.
Klutzis, that's Liechtenstein. That's beautiful.
We go to Liechtenstein, the series.
We are going too fast on the picture, sorry.
But it's interesting to see how a very painterly, not painterly, but specific motive can basically destroy the shapes as much as it is building them. And for Liechtenstein series, it's interesting as a comparison here, because the moire patterns, black and white patterns, which basically make the space shift into something different. The sculpture in the middle is a reference to Gustav Klutzis. He's a not that well-known constructivist artist. We know more Rodchenko, but he was a very important artist and designer at the time. He was a graphic designer and designed many devices actually for communication at the communist time. And the shape of the structure we saw previously, the one from Dynamo and the Secession in Vienna, is clearly a rendering in 3 dimensions. I mean, you made the motif become real, and of course, you got rid the previous image of all the text, of all the meanings. It became abstract again, because those artists were clearly evolving according to abstract logic, reducing the form to its simplicity. And the distortion that we can see in the real sculpture is there already. I mean, this is not regular shapes. Those are distorted. You have, unusual angles that make the whole thing really important, really shifting away your own space.
You can see as 2 frames also. It was used to frame information, and not, it was used to frame propaganda. And here it's empty. It's just the frame showing the distortion of the frame, the distortion of the media.
I don't know about the time, actually. We were supposed to be 45 minutes on live. I don't know.
Maybe we can finish with a short.
Somebody will
short
stop us.
Moving image.
Yeah.
Maybe you can play the film, which is extract of the installation replica in Barcelona last year.
Mhm.
or not.
Or not. Maybe not the films, but or maybe simply the last images. So, but anyway, we now we're back. We should go to the end. Well, no.
Yeah, let's finish with that.
Yeah, we can finish on this. So maybe the last word for you, Philippe, to close this conversation.
It's a quite complex shaped canvas for a quite simple drawing of a maze, but it's a one-line maze. So I like also to relate the painting to the idea of a reading. It's giving to the observer the sensation of reading. You can follow the line, and it gives you the sense of the shape. So, and the reading is also about, previous information, something already existent, giving something about language. And my abstraction is really about that, giving the language and cultural effect of it, and not trying to separate abstraction from the rest of the world. A film would come, and we can finish even with that.
Mm-hmm.
Without explanation, or with it's going to be.
I mean, it's a film, so you didn't paint this. You do a lot of films, and this is a nice way to actually to open the comprehension of your work to films, to symmetry again. And in this type, you use a specific marble on it, marble motifs, and we will maybe end on this to remind that Leonardo da Vinci actually was quoting the clouds and the marble lines that are absolutely designed by, kind of chains of physical forces that were in their capacity to draw motives. The human brain, who is always afraid of the void, will find patterns, will find recognizable shapes into it. But you are, of course, playing with it and playing with mirror effects, symmetry again, and it's very important. But we can't really see on the movie that it's an installation. This is not a movie that you look on a screen. All what you see here is 3 projectors projecting the same.
It's a one projector.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it's on a 3-sided walls. Sorry about that.
Yeah. With 2 mirror walls that are reproducing the image on reverse in a negative. It's becoming a negative space.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the effect you were talking about, the Pendelolia effect, is quite important. It's the projection of an image, existing image. It's image trouvée, and you can recognize a face, or it's like the mimesis. It's giving you information on something.
And at the same time, you don't want people to see this or that. You're not playing with that. You're just confusing, blurring these lines actually, and usually the speed of the way you handle time actually in your films provides people to really identify things, and that's one of the capacities of your works, to place people into a let's say a very dizzying effects. You don't want comfort. That's one of maybe of the last things I like about your work, is that you're not looking for to make the show or to ease the eye. You don't want comfortable things. I mean, your works are profoundly dynamic. Actually, they will trigger a response, a dynamic response into the viewer. These are not paintings. You look at comfortably into your, living room, contemplating your, a nice landscape or nice objects. It's something that we really experience. And that's why you are not only a painter for me, even if you consider yourself as a painter. I mean, your works have a very strong time-based aspect that goes along with the simplicity of things. So that's one of the reasons, actually, it goes into a very rare thing. I'm saying that as a friend for almost 20 years. And one of the reasons of me being really fond of your work even today. Philippe, maybe a last word?
Thank you, Matthieu.
It's done. Thank you for participating. Apparently, I have a message on the screen. And I don't know if we are still broadcasting or not. Maybe not. I have no idea. So bye.
Maybe
Philippe.
yes.
I will leave the studio. Wish you
Me
a nice
too.
Thank
you, Matthieu. Thank you.